Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday.
Hello. Normally I talk first. I didn't see the live thing go. I'm getting in my crisscross applesauce position. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I'm Brandon Tessers. I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for many reasons, primarily because it's on a public live streaming forum that anyone can jump into. With me today, as always, is Cecil. Say hello to the people. Together, we work as part of a group called Effective Artistry that does individual therapy, group therapy, individual executive functioning coaching, and blah, 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 blah. But this is just our kind of 1 hour a week to sit and chat and have a conversation, answer questions, give advice to whatever extent we can to whoever is able to be here. So for those of you who are here, thank you for being here. It's a lot. It would be pretty boring and sad if there was nobody here. So we're grateful for you. Every week we choose a theme. The theme this week is eating habits, I believe. Right?
Yes.
All right. Well, you double check that while I
Yes, eating habits. I want to make sure that was the word choice.
But we choose a theme just to kind of make it easier for people to engage. So it's not like coming into a random conversation or no conversation at all, and to solicit some questions ahead of time. And we choose topics that have been coming up in work with our therapists and coaches, that we see kind of like trends on. But we're here to talk about whatever we talk about, both Cecil and I, because we tend to get off on things because that's how our minds work. But most particularly those of you who are here in chat, whatever it is that you want to talk about is what we'll talk about. So we'll start with the topic just so we have something to start with, but wherever we go is where we go. Feel free to ask, comment, whatever.
Yeah.
Did I cover it, Cecil?
I think so. The first whatever, I don't think was as all encompassing as you think, but you really covered it with that second whatever. So I think our bases are covered on that.
You mock me, but there is communication and redundancy. Just like it's different to say something is very cool versus very, very cool, right? In this case, indicating that I don't know what all I'm talking about, kind of, I guess.
When I made the banner, I always thought about saying that there's a collection of I love Flannery O'Connor. She's an incredible author. Well, as I guess she's The Habit of Being is a collection of her letters and works. So I was started typing that random thought, but yeah.
Well, thank you, Bast Inside. That's a nice comment. You are too. So eating habits is the topic. That's where we'll start, and we'll go where we go. And we so kind of referenced it there. We're very careful about choosing what words we use for this topic. We wanted to bring this topic up because it's been coming up as questions for a lot of people. But we very specifically wanted to make sure nobody put the word healthy anywhere in any of this, because that's not what this is about necessarily, although certainly that can be part of what people are interested in. When we're talking about eating habits, it's a broad category like all these are, and it can go all over the place. But frankly, mostly when I get questions about eating habits, it tends to be more about, for neurodivergent people at least, interoceptive issues, issues with observing when I'm hungry and when I'm not, and when I'm getting hungry and when I should eat and how much I should eat or shouldn't. And it does range all over the place with people who will forget to eat. Ooh, I like this. We have like little link things that we can put.
When I remember them, I put them up.
That's nice. I like that. Yeah, I didn't even think to explain that word, but there it is. Obviously, this is, I don't satiety. Is that how that would be pronounced? As relating to satiation,
Yeah.
Being sated. Anyway, hunger and thirst and et cetera, et cetera. So it can be people who forget to eat, or people who don't know when to stop eating or what to eat, because the body and the brain do have mechanisms which monitor these things, right? And different people have systems that work to different extents, or satiatedness. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Or, even if those systems are monitoring things accurately in a way that we understand, if we have attention issues, we don't always necessarily notice what those systems are telling us. So yeah. And of course, these things mix in the same people, that I'm better about it these days, but for a long time, it would be if I'm at work or school or engaged in a thing that I would go 12 hours with, not only without eating, but without even thinking about the fact that I hadn't eaten. And on the flip side, if I'm bored and sitting and watching TV, I could eat any amount of food and still want to eat more and feel hungry, because my sense of, when my stomach is full or not is not great. And so I, like many of our clients, have had to develop external systems for eating and drinking. Cecil, by the way, is one of those things. Recently, just last week, I acknowledged that I get dry mouth. And I know it. I know it's happening. I try to be good about having stuff prepared and whatever, but I sometimes will get stuck in a session or something and be like, oh man, I really need a drink. But the option of actually stopping the session to go get it is not something that I even think about, much less, not that I think about it and reject it. I just don't even, it's like, oh, I'll get it later. So Cecil has been helping me by telling me to go, because he can tell when my mouth is dry. We've talked enough.
And it's not even like, oh, this isn't too personal, but it's not even like when you're in sessions. It's just when things are going on and we're working and we're doing things like you are hesitant to stop to get water. The same thing with me, and that's why it's easy for me to recognize it and use, because I do that and work on it as well. And Brandon and I both have a variety of drinking options in front of us, from coffee and tea and water and a LaCroix-esque thing. There's okay, cool. I have something within reach at all times.
I know we're getting a little down a rabbit hole, but we have a little kitchenette out there in our office where I have a Brita water filter and whatever. And yet I still also have a decanter with water in my office, because sometimes I will need a drink and the cost of getting up and going to the kitchen is too high, but the cost of getting up and going to that shelf over there works. And so I'll do it. So anyway, so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about eating habits. We are definitely not talking generally about eating healthy, and definitely not talking about weight management. Both of those things are important and relevant things to individuals. And so if those are things that people are working on or have questions about, then let's have the questions and we will talk about them. But we're not going to start with a default assumption that there is a way that people should all be eating, right? That there is such a thing as this is how to eat healthy, because it varies person to person, and there are way more variables than most people will acknowledge in what healthy eating means. And real quick, by the way, here's Cecil, you can make a banner for this one, because healthy is a word that I have a complicated relationship with. Because here's what it ultimately means. And usually when I say what a word means, what I'm talking about is how is it used? To what end is it being used? What purpose is a person trying to achieve with it? Healthy is a word that means a lot of things, but usually we use it when we're talking about, we are making predictions about outcomes for you later on down the line. And when we say that a thing is healthy, what we mean is, whoever is the speaker that's saying that the thing is healthy, what the speaker means is, I believe that if you do this thing this way, or don't do it, or do it this different way, or whatever, that you are more likely to have good outcomes later, or less likely to have bad outcomes later, or both. But like all things about projecting into the future, whether that's anxiety or planning or all these various different things we've talked about, it's not real, it's valid, it's helpful, it is good data to have, but it is statistical, it is analysis, it's patterns, it's predictions, which means it's helpful and we use it, but it cannot be true all the time. In other words, there are people who do every healthy thing you're supposed to do and still have a heart attack and die at 40. There are people who do every unhealthy thing that you're not supposed to do and live to 110. Now, obviously, there are trends here, right? Most people who live healthy lifestyles aren't having heart attacks at 40, and most people who do these unhealthy things aren't living to 120, but each of us only has a sample size of one. So yes, we use these things and they're important. They are not hard and fast rules of, if you do this, you will be healthy, you will have good outcomes. If you do that, you will be unhealthy, you will have bad outcomes. It's just tendencies and trends, which is about large populations, not an individual.
So is this banner good?
Yeah, we'll work on the specific like wording of it later.
Wow.
But yes, that's what healthy means. Healthy is just another way of saying good for you. Good for you is based on the observer, the speaker's perception of what it is that you're doing and what effects it will have later, and what things they know that you don't, and what things they don't know that you do. I'm saying all this because people tend to start with healthy as rules, right? Like it's healthy to sleep 8 hours a night. That's a rule, and it's good because that's based on actual observed evidence of how large groups of people sleep and how they feel, and then we do statistical analysis to round it out and average it out, and yeah. So if you're trying to experiment with your sleep, if you're tired and you want to change something up, it's a good place to start, is to say try to get 8 hours of sleep, because most people seem to do well with about that much. But you might need more or less, or you might need that 8 hours, but at a different time or in a different way. Same thing goes for food. And I'm saying all this because a lot of eating habit stuff, especially with people who are neurodivergent or people who struggle with interoception, especially with ourselves and our clients, a lot of those struggles start because eat healthy is rule number one. And then other things that are also important, like eat things that you like or eat things that are convenient or whatever, are down below. And people will end up in positions where it's like, okay, I know, for example, that I like to snack. And so if I have something snacky, this is actually true about me, right? That if I'm in a position where I'm relaxing, nighttime after my children are in bed and we're just chilling, I like to snack, especially crunchy. I'm very respond to that tactile, the vibration, not so much the flavor. So I'll eat if I have things like that. And if I don't, I might not. And is it healthier to eat, say, an apple than a handful of what are those things called where it's like the pretzels with the peanut butter inside,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Tasty treats. Maybe that's their scientific name, tasty treats.
Yeah, probably is, again, statistically.
I
But it's also healthier to eat some calories than no calories. And we've all been in that, well, maybe I shouldn't say we all, but many of us have been in that position of, I'm hungry, what do we have to eat? And you go look and you say, we have nothing to eat, even though there's food everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's food that would require preparation or, food that you're not interested in that moment or whatever. So it's, there's nothing to eat. So you walk away and then 5 or 10 minutes later, you're like, I'm hungry. And you go check again as though there are different options. And you get stuck in this cycle. So I'm not saying give up on eat healthy. I'm just saying think of it not as a hard and fast rule, but as one variable among many variables that can be, manipulated.
I mean, this could also be broadened to talk about more systematic issues and struggles of food deserts and everything else. Is accessibility to food also determines access to healthy, quote unquote, healthy eating and good eating, because those are things that are secondary to access to food,
Sure.
Which not everyone has control over that. Not everyone has access to the same amount of foods and such. So
yeah, that is definitely true. And yes, these things are factors. There were times in my life where Cecil knows it well, at least some of this stuff, where I would, need to make $20 last for 2 weeks worth of food. And that all of a sudden eating healthy and eating things that are enjoyable to eat becomes less of a priority than what things can I afford that will provide me enough calories to go for 2 weeks, right? So again, there's more variables than just that. And that doesn't even have to be the most important variable, even though many people treat it that way. And also, it's not bad to treat it as the most important variable. I'm not trying to argue against anybody. I'm just saying it's not hard and fast. It's not one and done. Yeah, low budget, low healthy content definitely tends to be true. Not always true, but tends definitely to be true.
I mean, there's a shift that good quality or healthy food is becoming more accessible. But am I getting feedback on anybody else's sound? I feel like I am on mine.
I am not hearing it. But
cool, awesome. is that there's a trend to like making those more accessible, but like just because people are trying to make it more accessible doesn't mean it's accessible. And that's also the cycle we get into, because we talk about eating habits, and the first thing we all want to think about is like, oh, I've got such bad eating habits. Like I have terrible eating habits. And it's like, I joke about them, but it's also like, I know they're so bad and I know they're not good for me. And like, and I also I'm like stuck in this cycle of just like feeling bad about it and eating to not feel bad about it. And it's just, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, this is all a great metaphor and I'm bad at like putting the metaphor before the horse in a sense. This all is a metaphor for everything else. It's resource management. What do I need to spend now to get where I need to get versus what can I do now that will set me up better for things later? And the more resources I have, the more I can afford to play the longer game, which ultimately, the Terry Pratchett, who writes the Discworld novels, wrote the Discworld novels. He's dead now, but there's a character of his called Sam Vimes who has I feel like it's the Sam Vimes economic theory of something. It's like anyway, where he'll talk about a wealthy man will buy expensive shoes that cost $100 but last for 20 years, and a poor man will buy cheap shoes that cost $10 but last for a year. So by the time 20 years have passed, the wealthy man has spent $100 and the poor man has spent $200, because the wealthy man can afford that upfront cost. And this is true not just of money and not just about eating. This is about our energy when we're urgent flying from one thing to the next because we feel like we don't have the time or the energy or both to kind of step and spend it on larger long-term payoff projects up front because we got to do this and do this, which then contributes to a cycle of it's always urgent.
Yeah, which kind of goes into the same thing that Pawn Circle said about food stamps is a fixed budget, so making them SNAP accessible doesn't mean that they're priced at a point where people can budget them, which is frustrating, and it's true because it's both. This is something that's both very true on an individual and systematic level. Is what Brendan said, that resource management is like, yeah, you can, if you had all the resources, you could go around this to whatever city you wanted to and make those food stamps last and buy the best of the best stuff and have this healthy buffet. But you don't have, who has the resources for that? So
well, some people, and
yeah.
And Bast Insider. Yes, I love Terry Pratchett. We could do a whole thing. Actually, maybe someday we should do a thing on just like fantasy and sci-fi. I don't know if it originated from Sam Vimes. That's where I learned it from. Maybe that was Terry Pratchett's way of working a real like socioeconomic theory into his books. But yeah, so what we're doing here, because everything is about the interaction of individuals and systems. Fault and responsibility are, again, useful and valid concepts that are useful when they're useful, and other times they're not, right? And because of the nature of what we're doing here, we are going to focus more on the individual. So we want to acknowledge these systems, but this and I and we are not the people who are dedicating our lives to fixing that system. We support those people who are, and we acknowledge what the systemic issues are. But then we're still coming back because our focus is on those of us who are here, on individuals, on creating things that work for one person. Other people are doing great work on the other thing. Because choices within constraints is the way I like to phrase it. There are constraints. There are elements in your environment that dictate what things are possible and what things cost what, right? Cost and value. But within those constraints, we do still have choice, and that's where we want to start, is with whatever choices we do have in the beginning. And then, whatever choices we make, we want to get wider and wider constraints is the idea. So, eating habits. If anybody has specific questions, go ahead and throw them out. Otherwise, I'm just going to put out what I think is relevant until somebody wants to put something out. Before we started this live stream, I was told that was a more inviting way to do it because us just sitting here silently waiting for someone to talk is very pressuring. So, and it's just a coincidence that I do also happen to like to rant about that.
What?
Shock and hope.
Yeah.
Here's the thing for me about eating habits and sleep and all these other things is I really do think of it as an interoceptive issue. That for someone who is perfectly in tune with their own body, and when their own body and their brain are working in concert and working, accurately, then yeah, you drink when you're thirsty and you eat when you're hungry and you eat what you want to eat when you want to eat it. But nobody is perfectly in tune with their interoceptive abilities, and nobody's interoceptive systems are perfectly accurate. So the further you get from that, the more extra work it takes.
Well, actually, this question we'll talk about in a second once you finish this thought. This is a good question.
So we want to, if you remember, any of you who were here or watched our episode on cleaning, it's a similar kind of thing. There are things that your brain prioritizes or deprioritizes over other things. Even if it is a priority, there might be enough other things that are even higher priorities in the environment that it still doesn't get noticed. So relying on when I feel like it, which works probably for most people, at least works relatively well for most people, may or may not work for any given individual. And if it doesn't, then we want to create systems that incentivize our future selves to do what our present selves want our future selves to do, meaning we set systems up to lower the cost, make it cheaper. I now, for the first time in my life, eat breakfast regularly because I eat a banana and a Kind protein bar, and I even set up a subscription on the Kind bar website so that 40 bars are delivered to my house every 45 days, because that is a lower cost for me than remembering to pick up Kind bars at the grocery, or preparing something new every time, or thinking about it each time. And there are I'll stop it there and let's do the question.
Cool. So this question comes to us from Pond Circles. How do you be consistent in removing something from your diet when someone in your house is not removing it?
Oof, that's a hard one. That is hard. So there are some practical things to do, but we'll start with a reminder of that cost and value thing. That a lot of us, when we're dealing, especially with health things, whether it's eating or physical activity, sleep, or whatever, tend to go back on the, I just gotta try harder. I gotta have more willpower and whatever. Which, we do that because it works to some extent, but it is never sustainable. So if there's something that I'll use soda as an example because I've had clients struggle with this particular thing. If you are trying to cut out soda, but the other people that you live with are not, and they love soda and it's always there, and you love soda, you're trying to cut it out because you're wanting to lose weight, or it's having an effect on you that you don't like, or that's your theory at least, or whatever. Yeah. Sooner or later, you're going to have a moment where you don't have enough willpower. Willpower is basically a subset of what we call energy. It runs out. It's a resource, and you're going to have the soda. And if you set it up in a certain way, you're going to feel like a failure because your goal was to never have soda and blah, blah, blah. So we'll start there. Number one, set an aim, not a goal. Oh, it's actually soda. Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. It's a common one. I like that. That works out. So number one, something like this is very specific and semantic, but these things matter. It's an aim, not a goal. A goal is a binary thing. You achieve it or you don't. And this would be a negative goal. I want to not drink soda. So you can never achieve that goal. There is only I failed or I haven't failed yet. You could go the rest of your life without drinking soda and drink it on your deathbed, and you failed a goal of I won't drink soda. Obviously, I'm being like hyperbolic about this.
I like that philosophy, though. There's only two options: to fail or haven't failed yet.
Yeah, well, that's when you have a lot of negative goals, and when you do. But if you set it as an aim, meaning this is what I'm going for, let me try some different things to see if I get there and observe how close I get. So then I use that information on the next one. Like if you think about if you wanted to learn archery and you went to the range the first time and took your first shot, do they call it a shot when you shoot a bow and arrow, right? A shot.
Yeah. Let's look this up.
I feel
shoot
anyway,
arrow,
when you loose your first arrow, when you take your first shot, the chances that you hit the bullseye right in the middle, pretty low, right? So if your goal is, I want to hit the bullseye, then the first time you do it will be a failure. And maybe you'll say, okay, it's my first time. I'm being generous to myself. Let me try and let me try and let me try. But sooner or later, that generosity will still run out, and you'll be like, I have been trying for so long, and I still am not hitting the bullseye. I suck at this. I'm giving up. Whereas if you do it as an aim, the correct verb is eat. When you take your first yeet, when you yeet the arrow, I like it. When you take your first yeet, you see where it goes. And rather than saying success or failure, which is a binary, you just observe the reality, which is complex. It went here. Okay. Now let me try and make this adjustment for the second one and see what happens. Oh, that one even went further. Okay. So let me go back to the first thing and make this adjustment. Oh, that got closer, but then actually went so far that it actually still was further, just in the other direction. And make another adjustment, get closer, another adjustment, get closer and closer. And if you never hit the bullseye, that's still okay, because being able to hit, the ring right around the bullseye 3 out of 5 times, you've come a lot closer to what it is you're trying to do than when you couldn't even hit the whole target. Harm reduction. Yeah, that's a really good way of putting that. And yes, absolutely. Harm reduction is a real part of what we're talking about here, that the goal is not to never engage in quote unquote unhealthy behaviors, especially ones that, people are going to engage in, but rather to make it so that when people do, it is as least harmful as possible. Now, there's still something in that of harm and healthy, is still a projection into the future and is different from one person than the next. Aiming at less soda is a better way to look at it, since it will always be a temptation I cannot eliminate from my environment. Yeah, well, you can still aim at not having any soda at all, but that's your aim. And maybe you'll get there. In fact, an even better way to do it would be to aim for not having any soda in a day, or not having any soda in a week, because you can accomplish that sometimes. And it's just about monitoring what other variables besides the presence of the soda in the house seem to correlate with you getting closer or further away from that aim, so that it's just an ongoing experiment, so that it's not a I'm good at, I'm bad at thing. Now that's kind of a higher level one that's applicable in a lot of ways. Here are some more practical and specific ones. If your spouse wants to keep drinking soda, then ask if your spouse would be willing to keep that soda in a place that they can access, but is more difficult to access for you. Either because it's more difficult for both of you to access, which they may or may not be willing to do, or because there's some place in which they can keep it that is just as easy or even easier for them to access, but harder for you, that you are less aware of it. That you could ask them, for example, to try not to drink it around you. Now, again, that's a value thing, and if they're willing to do that, that's great, but it will be inconsistent. Or, as silly as this sounds, this is how my brain works. I look for every practical thing I can find that adjusts the cost or the value even tiny bits. So get cozies, like beer cozies, and ask them, put the cozies right next to the soda and ask them to use it, which might be easier because cozies actually do make the soda not whatever, or put it into a glass that's opaque or whatever, so that when they are drinking it, you don't have a visual reminder of what it is that they're drinking, which decreases your awareness of the soda, meaning that it is then therefore easier, even if only marginally, for you not to drink soda because you're less aware of it.
So with this, is there's all these ideas of let me make everything else bend around and stuff. Why, what I'm asking here essentially is it feels like if I was in this situation, I'm am I that weak that I need to I can't even see it? And that sometimes it's hard for me. And I know that that's a problematic statement. It's not I don't, oh, I can't be around someone who's doing that because it's makes me feel like an addict or something. I'm oh. But what do we do with that?
Well, the truth is that is the opposite of what's actually happening. That's why that particular thought, that particular feeling can be such a trap for people. Oh, I should be stronger. I shouldn't need this support. I shouldn't need that help. And we get stuck in these things of, oh, I should only ask for help if I need it, which really just means I have to be in a certain level of pain before I'm allowed to ask for help, right? But the flip side, people who are thinking that, by definition, are the opposite of what they're worried that they are. Meaning, if what you're saying is, oh gosh, am I so weak that I can't even see soda without it tempting me. First of all, that's still rooted in that binary, I'm going to drink it or I'm not going to drink it, as opposed to how much does it cost me not to drink it. And second of all, once you understand that, then what you're really saying is, I think things should be more difficult for me to do. For whatever reason, call it strength and weakness if you want. And certainly it comes from messaging, from the environment, from other people, from the culture. And certainly toxic masculinity is a very big part of this, but definitely not the only part of this. But yeah, what you're saying is, this shouldn't be this easy for me. It should be harder for me. Therefore, then it would be more worthy. I would be more worthy if I was accomplishing this while it was more difficult. But here's the other question. If it's easier for you, that means it costs you fewer resources. What are you going to do with those resources you save? That's the only question that matters. Because if you end up taking those extra resources, and again, I know this is like little ticky-tack things, and how do you really track how much energy is freed up because you don't have to see it and use willpower to avoid it, whatever. It's really just a matter of, at the long end of it, after going through all the steps of it, is, do you like what you're doing? The question of should I be stronger is a question that people only ask when they're trying to do the things that other people are telling them that they should do, not the things that they actually want to do, which all of us have to do to some extent. But the more you do that, the more of your resources are being spent on doing things or not doing things because other people told you to, the more you're going to ask questions about weak and strong. The more you're engaged in the things that you think are important, that you find enjoyable, that you feel mean something, you're not going to have as much time for, shouldn't this be easier for me? In fact, you're going to be saying, how can I make this easy thing even easier so that I can free up more for this other thing? And again, not that I'm like using these people as a big example of what to do, but there's a reason that like people at the tops of large hierarchical systems, CEOs and whatever, offload even the tiniest and easiest tasks, because they don't wrestle with this feeling of guilt and shame, or if they do, they don't let it stop them from, I could do that, of course, but if you do that for me, then I can do this other thing.
I mean, eating is a great example of that, like having the chefs, having provided, be able to have access to that. I mean, if the resources, you could do that without thinking twice about it.
A couple other practical suggestions to lower the cost of not drinking soda. Sorry, Cecil, I got distracted by a question or a comment and didn't even hear the second half of what you said. Can you say it again for me, please?
No, it's perfect. It goes right into what you were saying. Which comments did you want to bring up?
Well, I appreciate that, but can you actually say it again for me?
Well, I was distracted too, so and I forgot, and now I have to admit that I was not paying attention to what I was saying.
Well,
I was looking up the lyrics to Britney Spears' "Stronger" because I had that stuck in my head.
I like that.
Yeah, and free Britney people. No.
So definitely. A couple other practical things are things like get yourself replacement stuff, LaCroix or bubbly or whatever, because going from, instead of a soda, I'll have this other thing that I enjoy but not quite as much, or even enjoy the same or enjoy more, is a much less costly decision and therefore easier. Also asking if your spouse can get soda that you don't like. Soda is a broad category. We can get more granular. He likes Dr. Pepper, which you hate. You both like root beer. Please don't get root beer. Get Dr. Pepper as much as possible, kind of thing.
Again, it comes back down to communication.
Yeah,
like a lot of,
I missed a bunch of them, so I got to go back.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to.
Sugar, okay. Comfort factors. So sugary drinks are more rewarding than water. Water is healthier, but it's not comforting, which gets into whole food as comfort, which I know is a troubling concept. Okay, I like that. Let's talk about that. But let me keep reading comments just to make sure I was seeing them all. What I'm hearing is naming a less soda. Yeah, that's good. Interoception. Oh, okay. That's a good question too from Bast Insider. So if you like, we'll cue that up.
And Heather Ross is an exact point. Yes. Yeah, we're just going through. Don't you love the silence we're having?
There is a buzzy thing. I think that buzzy thing might be from Cecil's end. Mute for a second, Cecil. Yeah, it went away if you just muted. It sounds like there's something actually like physically vibrating near the mic is what it sounds like. Anyway, sugar. Let's talk about sugar, because sugar is one of those things. Caffeine, like there are certain things. I make fun of my wife and her family all the time because they have certain like family tradition things that for some reason, like they won't eat iceberg lettuce. If you say, I would like some iceberg lettuce, every single time, no matter which member of the family is there, they will respond with some version of, iceberg lettuce has no nutritional value, right? And it's not that that's not a true statement. I assume that it is. I wouldn't know, but I assume it's true. It's like, but there's a lot of other things that don't have nutritional value that we eat anyway. Why is this one that we're focusing on, right? So sugar is one of those things. And especially for people with ADHD, sugar is often something that people can use to like moderate their functioning in ways that they find beneficial or enjoyable. Notice how hard I worked to not say self-medicate, because I hate that term so bad. Iceberg lettuce is blasphemy. I'm surrounded by people who are just wrong about iceberg lettuce all the time. Iceberg lettuce is delicious. No, if you like sugar, you like sugar. And yes, this is one of those things where we can say it's unhealthy. And yes, that is an accurate statement, because what we see is when we do large studies, the trends are that for most people in most circumstances, they will be more likely to blah, 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 blah. But an individual can eat all kinds of sugar all day long, every day. As an individual could even theoretically do something like eat an entire pint of ice cream every night before bedtime if they wanted to. If someone out there was doing something like that. I eat a lot of sugar at night.
Shade.
Only if you acknowledge that that's you. I didn't say
I'm not saying, I'm just saying that someone could feel targeted by that.
Honestly, my eating habits have always been in my whole life, if I let my body go and do what it wants, and part of this is interoception and whatever, is going long stretches without eating anything and then eating a lot all at once. And yeah, a lot of that is sugary or carbs or, whatever things. Now there are things to pay attention to there. I do better when I have protein in the morning, which is not something that I actually, discovered on my own, figured out, right? Like I read about protein and its relationships to neurotransmitters. And so I experimented with trying protein and things got better. Can I say one-to-one that that's definitely because of the protein? No, but whatever things are working, that happened in concert with the protein, I can't isolate it. So why stop? It's better. So I'll keep going. Do I feel like eating it in the morning? No, which is why I set a schedule. I eat a banana and a protein bar at about 7:45 because I like to eat it before I take my meds, and I take my meds at 8. In the noon to 1 o'clock hour, I eat a Greek yogurt and an apple or a nectarine or whatever. I've been struggling with that since getting into the office because I don't always remember, like I forgot today, to bring those things in. So instead I had a handful of pistachios because that's all I have here. Now, one thing I'll do in response to that is to buy larger stocks of those things to keep here at the office, so that running out is something that will happen less frequently, and having to remember to bring things is not a daily task, but a once a week, once every other week task, which lowers the cost. If you like sugar, it's okay to like sugar. Now, if you're eating a bunch of sugar and then you have a hard time going to sleep, well, okay, then research shows us that if you're going to make some changes and experiment with what things help you sleep better, identifying sugar as a thing to try and experiment with doing less of or whatever is a good place to start. It has a likely chance of influencing that. But you might cut out all that sugar and have the same experience with sleep, or even worse experience with sleep, because now you're hungry when you go to bed or whatever, right? There's nothing that is in and of itself, well, okay, I'm not going to say nothing. There's very little that is inherently and universally damaging. That to every person, it is damaging independent of the context that that person is in. And I can say this pretty confidently. Anything that a significant number of people enjoy, by definition, has beneficial qualities, or we would not have evolved as a species in order to enjoy those things. Sugar in particular gives you energy. There's a reason that we have taste buds and brains that tell us that sugar tastes good because it gives you energy. There's a reason that we like fats because fat is the basic building blocks of the brain. I mean, I'm oversimplifying and Cecil knows better, but humans have large brains and we need a lot of fat to do that. So we are incentivized, and of course it's not purposeful. It's just how evolution works.
I like to look at it like, if we talk about a car, are we judging a car if we put 87 octane in it or 93 octane? It's like, you look at it like that. Like, you don't overfill gas tank because there's no space for it. But that's a whole thing to itself. But like that kind of
obviously there's discussion about meat, but that's also variation from person to person.
Yeah, which I think brings us into this other question that you wanted to talk about, was this one that says, so if I have trouble with interoception, I can't even read, sorry, things, how do you tell when or what you should eat? Do you need to add that to your list of things to keep track of?
All right, well, okay, first of all, I got a little distracted because Vast Insider said that's an odd use of by definition, and I can't remember the context in which I used it, but it's definitely a phrase I use a lot. And usually when I use it, I'm using it as an emphatic point, like very, very, to basically mean there are no exceptions to what I'm saying. But I don't even know what the other use. I mean, I thought that's what most people used it to mean. Anyway, side note, language, it gets in there. How do you tell when what you should eat? Well, bad news, everybody. For every person, there are things that do not come naturally to them that they believe come naturally to others, most others, everybody else. And those things may or may not be accurate. Stuff people like is by definition important for body function. Oh, yeah, no, I stand by that. Yeah, if it's a significant group of the population, this is the whole reasoning behind neurodiversity too. If a significant group of the population experiences a certain thing, a certain variation, there must be some evolutionary reason that trait still exists and wasn't weeded out. Either that or it's a relatively recent mutation, but how would that be so widespread? I know it's more complicated than that, but because there's injury and there's pathology, and there are things like we didn't have access to a lot of meat, so we're over incentivized to eat meat because it took extra effort to get it, and now that it's easy, we're going to eat a lot of it. I'm just saying that at the root of it, there must have been a reason that we evolved that way. But that's only true if it's like a large group of people. Anyway, this is one of those things that, yes, you might need to apply intellect to that other people don't. Meaning that you do need to spend some of your time, your energy, your attention, your awareness on a thing that for other people works without them having to spend those resources. This is how I define privilege, how I find privilege helpful to define it, is things that you don't have to spend resources on that other people might. That's why it's so hard to notice it, because the whole point is whatever privilege it is that you are experiencing is a thing that you don't notice. That's what privilege means. You don't have to pay attention to this. It is not important to you to pay attention to this because it has not hurt you or could not hurt you or whatever. So yeah, this is one of those things. Now, that doesn't mean it's got to be miserable day to day. You got to keep track of it always. And honestly, that's a lot of what I hate about a lot of common advice for neurodivergent people, and especially ADHD people, is it's here, set up this system that requires constant maintenance and constant vigilance, as opposed to set up a system which, yes, does take time and energy and effort and blah, blah, blah up front, but then automate it in such a way so that it doesn't take that anymore ongoing. Like, I don't track my calories. I don't track what I eat every day because I eat the same damn thing for every breakfast and every lunch. It does not require me to keep track of things. Go ahead, Cecil.
So, okay, I'm kind of like, stay with me, everybody, on this. So I feel like this talks about a lot, like this is a kind of a very big statement. So it reminds me a little bit when we're talking about like prefrontal cortex shutdown and anxiety and all other fun stuff that we did previous episode, was instead of just being like, oh, I have to add a task on, like I have to eat lunch and here's the thing that I'm going to make this whole thing and that's what I'm going to do every day, is like what I did with, because I'm similar to Brandon in this eating thing, is after a day, I would just kind of like have a reminder to check in with myself and be like, how am I feeling? I'm like, ooh, I don't feel great. And I'm like, oh, I didn't eat. Okay. So maybe I should eat. Okay, well, next day I'm gonna try to eat something. Well, what can I do? You know, and then to the point where like I just have a protein shake in the morning. I just vegan protein stuff you get at Costco. And so it's just a granular thing of just like, oh, something happened. After it happens, oh, Robo Cecil, I also heard that. I don't think this my mic keeps switching back and forth automatically on me, which is weird.
No, it sounds okay. It sounds okay. I mean, there are little clicks, at least on my end. There's little clicks there, but it's fine.
But it's about like checking yourself, trying things, and then reevaluating, and then just kind of making it easier so that like it no longer is a thing I have to think about, and I'm not setting a whole schedule of things. I'm going about it in an almost engaging way that's lower cost to me because that's just what worked, and like maybe that works for someone, maybe it doesn't. But
yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be solved all at once. And that is a lot of what happens in hyperfixation sometimes is we notice a problem with a thing, but our attempt to address that problem is to address like this whole system of which that problem is a part. And that's fine. That's one way to do it if you have the time and energy and a good idea and whatever. But sometimes it's, no, I'm changing one thing at a time because every day is that. Every moment is that for people. That's what our brains are doing is, what am I noticing? Oh, it's both of us. I sound
we're turning to robots.
I don't know.
It must be our server that is having issues with it.
I guess, yeah. Because I hear you okay. I don't know that we can do anything about that. So
yeah.
Oh,
never mind. Okay.
Okay. See, look at that. Look how quickly that happens. We become aware of a problem. We start to analyze the problem. Is it this? Is it this? We utilize our schema of what things might cause a problem like that until we arrive at a conclusion. And then I say, oh, there's nothing we can do about that, which enables me to let go of it, which, by the way, is why everybody likes to blame and get angry and put fault on things, because that's a way of saying this problem still exists and isn't resolved, but there's nothing I can do about it, so I can let it go. It's something else or somebody else's problem. Even if it still bothers me, even if it still harms me, I can move on from it because it's their fault and I can't do anything about it, whether that's true or not. And then as soon as that's on my end, which again, we have no idea what the reality of any of this is because it doesn't match our perception, but we are being influenced by and impacted by somebody else's language, somebody else's communication to us. So what actually happened over there doesn't matter. What happened for us is we became aware of a problem. We became distracted off of the thing we were trying to do because that problem became urgent. And then we were told that that problem no longer existed. And now we move on. None of that might have actually happened. I believe you, Bast Insider. I don't think you're lying. I'm just saying that's the point is that anyway, yes, it can be incremental changes. And yes, we want to automate things as much as possible. The default way of functioning as a human is to do whatever you want, whenever you want. Like that's the initial response, right? There's a whole thing. Well, I read somebody say recently, and I love it, of there are 3 irreducible experiences in human cognition, which is affect, feeling, cognition, thinking, and volition, desire. Meaning we can come up with all kinds of theories about why I think or feel or want a certain thing, but we can't reduce what that experience is. I think this. What does that mean? What do you mean you think it? How are you think? I don't know. I just think it. I just feel it. I just want it. And people miss that last part. Desire is not a thing that we can break down. We can have theories about why and how to modify it, but we can't explain what wanting a thing is any smaller than I like it. I want it. I don't know.
And that's why desire is one of the endless.
Is one of what?
The endless. It's a Sandman reference. All you comic book people.
Affect, volition, and cognition. Thinking, feeling, and wanting. Anyway, where were we before the problem?
I was talking about like analyzing at the end of the day and the gradual changes of being like, oh, I need to eat. Well, how can I eat? Let's try this. And then kind of engaging with it experimental way.
It's an experiment. Oh yeah. So everybody starts by just doing what they want when they want. Like that's what babies do, like just live purely in the moment. Right. And then as we grow up and as we experience things, we start to create correlations and make meaning and find order out of chaos and make predictions. And so we start sacrificing what we want in the moment in order to gain more of what we want later. And we can go further and further and further into that. And I will say that I believe that generally neurodivergent people are people who tend to be more willing to sacrifice the moment for the future which is, I know, different than what a lot of people think, especially in terms of impulsivity, but it's a whole nother thing. So yeah, do some people just eat what they want when they want? Probably, but probably not many people have like never had to do any like deliberation, cognitive, spend resources on what do I want to eat? When do I want to eat it? Is that thing that I ate bothering me now? Will this thing help me? I feel like most people probably do that to some extent, and some people do it more than others. And so, yeah, we have different things that are more efficient and less efficient. But how do you tell when what you should eat? Turn it into an experiment. The whole like framework of everything we do, executive function wise, therapy wise, really not just us, even everybody that does it. The point is to take something that you haven't spent much time, energy, awareness on investigating, and create space and time, so that you can investigate it, and then kind of repackage it and put it away so that you don't need to investigate it again in the future. That, oh man, I keep feeling like crap every day at 4 p.m. And at first you're just going to say that's what it is. And when it happens enough, you're going to start saying, okay, what is it that's causing this? Let me investigate it. And you're going to come up with theories and you're going to test them. And when one works, if you got one right off the bat, or if somebody gave you advice and it worked, you're done. But if it doesn't, you get more into it and more into it and more into it. So how to tell when what you should eat? You track it. You think about it. You say, oh yeah, I could talk a lot about how much I hate the marshmallow test. It's the worst. Ability to delay. Anyway, I hate the marshmallow test. I hate a lot of those like
marshmallow-based studies.
I was going to say like 1940s to 1970s, 80s famous psychological experiments.
They are very fascinating to see the actual studies of them, but the implication that people have taken from them is super problematic. But all these studies, especially the studies done on drugs, is done with rats. And my partner and I have had rats for a while. For 10 years, we had rats and loved them. And they're fascinating creatures. But it's a whole different topic. But the actual studies are very fascinating, but what we take from them is terrible.
Today. No, I'm with you. And I, of course, I have theories because I have theories about everything, but about the rise of expert culture over that same period in time and how the information is disseminated and celebrity of. Anyway. What if you feel crappy all the time? Ooh, that's a good question. Because here's the answer. You don't feel the same level of crappy or the same kind of crappy all the time. If you divide it into a binary, I feel good, I feel crappy, then yeah, you very well might feel crappy all the time. I believe you. How would I know any different? It's your experience. But I guarantee that you do not feel the exact same level of crappy, or even if you theoretically somehow did, that it's not about the same things. And yes, this is where we go back to making scales that are arbitrary and ridiculous of, here's the question. If crappy is on one end of the spectrum, what is on the other? What is
not crappy? A win.
Differentiating crappiness might very well be too much work. That's a fair thing to ask. Mm-hmm. That's when you need other people to help you with it, or you survive until things get better and you have more resources available. There are constraints, right? Like, this is not just about, you can think about everything differently and everything will get better. You do have finite resources. I feel like a lot of people who engage in this kind of paradigm of, whether it's therapy or coaching or self-help or whatever, gurus and whatever, tend to take this thing of like, no, every problem is solved by an individual. If you know everything you need to know, which I can tell you, and coincidentally, and you just have to give me some money or whatever for it. And if you do everything that you're supposed to do, which again, coincidentally, I can tell you if you give me money, then you will be happy. And if you're not, then you did it wrong. I'm sorry, because the system is perfect, so. Of course, sometimes you don't have more resources. Now, you do have resources. You may have more or less than you have had at other times. You may have more or less than other people do. I don't know how we really compare that part, but you do have them and they are going somewhere. But yes, the task of evaluating where those resources are going is a task. And if the things that you're doing are taking all your resources and you have none left over for the task of evaluating where they're going or even observing where they're going, you get stuck. And the only way out of that is either with somebody else's help or waiting until something changes that just frees up some of those resources.
So that brings up an interesting topic. So what I would like to suggest, most like next week, is like how to ask for help in situations, because when you have limited resources, like I'm thinking about, like you're like, I came to determine the difference between this crappiness because it's too much work, and you're like, well, maybe you don't have someone around you who can help you, or you don't even know how to ask for that help. Is like, maybe we should talk about like how to ask for help, what it looks like, and the experiment of doing that.
Yeah, we absolutely can. Although I would even change that phrasing, because asking for help still places the responsibility on the person who needs to ask for help.
Yeah,
That you get better at asking for help.
So what about we talk about, like, because I mean, we're just down the time, and I'd love to talk about this idea of, because we all have to say about support and
eventually this all circles back to do the things that you like and want, because doing that more means that you're around other people who like and want to do the same things that you do, which means that you're around people who tend to be more like you, which means that you're around people that don't take as much of your resources to navigate the world around, and people who know naturally more of what you know and notice more naturally what you notice. So it's harder for you, or maybe even impossible for you, to hide your struggles from them, even if you do actively try, which you don't always, so that they'll see it, and then therefore be more likely to want to help because they understand what it feels like, and want to help because they care about you, and be able to help because they know the experience to some extent and have things on their own. It's what we're doing here right now, right? Like, it does all eventually come back to, we got to get it so that people are able to do as much of what they want to do as possible. It's not all, it's definitely not all, it's not practical or possible for 100%, but as much as possible. But also, that's why we're here, right? And yes, everyone always needs a lot more D&D in their life. That's always true, but that's why we're here. Nobody here asked us to do this, right? We did it because of our experiences, because of what we believe, because of what we think might be helpful. So we're here and we put it out there. We don't even market it or advertise it or whatever. It's just here, and you found it, and it's helpful to you, hopefully, in whatever way that it is. And that's why you keep coming back. You didn't have to ask for that. And that's what happens when we get stuck in those, call it burnout, call it, overwhelm, call it whatever. When we get stuck in places where we are spending every resource we have, doing the best ideas we have to just get by. And especially when we're just shy of getting by, so it's not sustainable, but it's unsustainable in a very slow decline, that's the worst. But even if it is sustainable, but just barely, that's pretty rough. Then yeah, the only way out is for other people to help you, or for something else outside of your control or knowledge to change. But that's what community is supposed to be. That's why in those times when you're not feeling that way, theoretically, hopefully, what we want is for people to be getting into communities that will be able to cover for you when you are in that place. Look at I love adventure shows based around teams, right? Mm-hmm. I love them. And part of the reason I love them is because of the big damn heroes moment, because it is a trope, and it's so tropey that it doesn't even have dramatic tension anymore, that, this member of the team has been captured or is in a situation where it looks like they're about to die. The other members of the team are going to show up and save them. And we put that in our stories over and over and over and over, because that's what life is. Sometimes you do just need other people to come in and help you. Sometimes you can't even get a request to help to them, even if you wanted to. And sometimes you don't want to. Found family. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a term. I get that. That's a powerful term. And it
is a powerful term, and it is especially powerful within the context of the LGBTQIAA+ community. But it's something that is powerful in many communities, call it family, call it whatever, call it love. For me, my definition of love is I am willing to sacrifice my resources, spend my resources for your well-being, not in a selfless way, but because your well-being or your existence or your experience is so in my awareness that there's not a way for me to be happy if you're not happy, especially if I think that there's something that I theoretically could do to make you happy. That's what love means to me. And I know I define words very strangely, but that's what it is. Call it family, call it friends, call it whatever. It's, I'm aware of you. That's it. That's all you need to know, is that I'm aware of you. So whatever you experience, it's in my awareness. Maybe I'm right about it. Maybe I'm wrong about it. What I do about it or don't do about it, whatever, but I'm aware of you. So if you go missing, I'm going to come looking. And when we feel loved is when we feel that that's true, that if I went missing, you're going to come looking. So I don't got to worry so much about whether or not I'm going to go missing, and I can focus my resources on other things rather than being very, very careful to never misstep, because no one will come to save me. We're ending on a very
No. So from eating habits to going missing. We are at time.
thank you,
everybody.
But put that work in, observe, theorize, create an intervention, implement the intervention, observe the results of the intervention, and start again. I cut back on sugar. Now what happens? Oh, still bad. Okay, come up with a new theory, implement that one, and so on and so forth. But once you hit on things that you like, that you do find that work for you, automate it. Mm-hmm. Make it outside of your as much as possible. Decrease the cost. I don't have to remember it. I don't have to buy it. It is easy kind of thing. Sorry, go ahead, Cecil.
And yes, I'm most likely to have eaten those cookies if they're within reach. Just so you know. Cool. But that's it for us for this week's This Is Not Therapy Hour. Thank you guys for joining us and for engaging. It is really helpful. The more you guys engage, the easier it is for us. We want to do this to help. And if it helps, hopefully, we want to keep doing it. If not, we'll shut up. So, but check us out, effectiveartistry.com. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram at @EF_artistry. Send us an email, contact us, catch us here next week. If you have any questions, let us know. And we hope to see you guys next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for talking. Bye.